Hello, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to this Getting Ready to Teach T-Level Technical Qualification in Accounting, the Occupational Specialism event. I hope you're well this afternoon and are ready to have a look through the occupational specialist aspect of this T-level qualification. You will see if you've got the group chart open, I've already pasted in a link there for you. These events, the Getting Ready to Teach events, are designed as the second stage of events to follow Getting to Know the Specification events, which are recorded events, and you'll find those events, if you haven't listened to those already, on the website link that I've put into the group chat. So please do, if you haven't used it already, copy and paste that website address out. You'll find the accounting qualification pre-recorded events for getting to know the specification there, if you have any further questions or you want to review them in a little bit more detail. Okay, so what have we got in store for you this afternoon? Okay, well, this is the agenda. This is what we're kind of going to go through. We're going to give you a chance to have a look at the specification, and I'm going to provide an overview of the specification, but of course I can't go through every line and every aspect of the occupational specialism. We'll be going through the key highlights, and then later on we'll be having a little bit of an opportunity to look at some of the aspects of the occupational specialism specification in a little bit more detail. We'll talk about the planning of the programme initially as well. I'm sure that you're all at different stages with that, so some of you may have planned already, some and considering starting in September. Others may be just at the starting point and come along to find out a little bit more. So we'll have a talk about planning the programme and have opportunity for you to share your ideas with each other. And then we'll look at some teaching and learning ideas for the occupational specialism. So having a look at some of the different aspects of the specification and kind of think of some ideas of the type of things that you might involve yourself with in terms of delivery and, of course, formative assessment. Then we'll spend a little bit of time focusing on external assessment at the end, just so that you're familiar with kind of what the end outcome is for learners, what we're expecting them to do at the end for specification. And of course, it is an opportunity for you to network with other practitioners and also for us to answer some frequently answered questions, or of course your questions. Now, there's two ways that you can communicate with me this afternoon. When we undertake group activities, I will ask you to put your thoughts, ideas, key issues into the group chat box. That enables everybody to see it and enables us to share, things of good practice, maybe, some ideas or challenges that other people haven't thought of. If you have a question directly to me, please use the Q&A box, please. Don't worry if you don't feel that I've answered it straight away. I will go and look at that at different times during the session this afternoon and ensure before we finish at 5:30 that we have covered everything that you've asked and requested. If I don't know the answers to any of the questions, I will make a note of those this afternoon and I'll pass them back to Pearson and they will get back to you to confirm any unresolved queries or questions that you have at the end of the event today. So without further ado, I'm going to get going. I'm going to start to have a look at planning the programme and just to try and give you an overview of the programme, and I'm sure some of you are fully aware of this already, but for those who are not, and to make sure we all have the same information, I'm just going to go through this so that we all understand the key aspects of this T-level qualification. So the T-level in accounting includes the technical qualification and an industry placement. This requirement of English and Maths at GCSE or Level 2 functional skills has now been removed, and there's no need for any additional specialist qualifications to be completed for this T-level. The technical qualification is made up of a core component and one occupational specialism. The core component covers the underpinning knowledge, concepts and skills that support threshold competency in the accountancy industry. It's got a 500 guided learning hours and is assessed through 2 externally set core examinations and an employer set project. For the accounting qualification, there's one occupational specialist component, which is 600 guided learning hours. And students undertake the T-level technical qualification in accounting will complete the assistant accountant vocational specialism. Now, students undertaking the T-level qualification in accounting will be able to complete their T-level by completing 315 hours industry placement within an occupational specialism selected for the student and by the student. This is not something that Pearson is involved with. Guidance from the Department of Education states that the industry placement will last a minimum of 315 hours, which is approximately 45 days, but can last longer. Employers can offer industry placements as a block, day release, or a mix of these, and part of this industry placement can be shared with another employer if necessary. Providers and employers are expected to work together when planning the industry placement, and when planning the programme, each of the following these factors are important when taken into consideration. Okay, so just a little bit of information around guided learning hours and total qualification time. So the technical qualification specification is divided, as we said, into the core component and the occupational specialist component. The TQT, the total qualification time, and the GLH, the guided learning hours for this qualification, and the two components are shown on the slide. The total qualification time, in terms of the T-level technical qualification in accounting, has a value of 1,310 hours. The core component has a total qualification time value of 610, and the occupational specialist component has a value of 700. In terms of guided learning hours, the T-level technical qualification in accounting has a GLH value of 1,100 hours. The core component has a GLH of 500, and the occupational specialist component has a GLH value of 600. Now, it's important that we're aware of the difference between the GLH and the TQT. As well as guided learning, there may be other required learning that's directed by tutors and assessors. This involves, for example, private study, preparation for assessment, undertaking assessment when not under supervision, such as preparatory reading, revision and independent research. The total qualification time and the guided learning hours are assigned after consultation with users of qualifications. Okay, so that's just a brief overview. So what I'd like you now to do is undertake a short activity where you can have a look and consider thinking about planning your programme. Now, in particular, of course, the focus today is the occupational specialism. So what I'd like you to consider is, within that, how would you sequence the programme? So where would the occupational specialism come? What would you do before it? What would you do after it? What would you do alongside it? How, by using the occupational specialism and, of course, the core component, how would you plan for staff specialisms? And how would you plan for assessment? And what further information might you need to be able to plan your programme? So I'll give you some time to reflect. I will pause my mic during that time to give you time to reflect. And if I can ask you, please, just to put your thoughts, ideas, key sort of queries into the group chat. And then we can share them all together in a few moments' time. So over to you for a moment just to consider this activity for planning the programme. I can see in the chat there's some comments regarding starting placements and when's most appropriate. It'd be interesting to see if we could gather really, all of our opinions really on how we think that's going to work and how we're going to deal with that in terms of, balancing the vocational specialism and giving them some experience first. So if you can't, I can see that Deborah and Paul are having a bit of a discussion in there as just suggested. If anybody else has got any comments, then please do put them into the chat. I'll be back with you in a few moments just to kind of review, but do give your opinion if you do have one or any questions that you have. Okay, thanks for your comments and your contributions. I'm going to start making a sort of way through and start discussing planning the programme, just to consider we've got quite a lot of other things to do. But just to kind of review your comments, I think the comments that I've made actually are really pertinent ones, and ones that I wanted to raise myself is the fact that, Paul, I agree. Most people, I think, will look at doing the core in the first year, getting that done and dusted, and assessed in the first year, hopefully, for the only time, if not leaving chance for resets in the second year, and then going on to the specialism in the second year. Some centres are staggering slightly or planning to stagger slightly, so, starting the core, but maybe introducing some of the accounting in the first year to give them a bit of a head start so that they can start thinking about those industry placements and making sure that they're appropriately prepared for those industry placements. And yeah, in terms of staffing, yeah, really good point as well. The requirement in the second year, and I think some of you picked it up further on through the chat, actually some of the technical specialist stuff in the occupational specialism is very specialist. So you are going to need accounting tutors and expertise there. If you do have expertise in some of those areas lacking, you're going to have to think about how you fill those gaps. Maybe, looking at, guest speakers, upskilling maybe some members of staff that might be willing to do that. Maybe, working with employers within the workplace to see if they can provide any additional support. So yeah, lots of comments out there. Deborah, I agree with your comment about placements completely. Going into accountancy, practices, into accountancy departments within industry. There is going to be an expectation that this student is going to be an accountancy specialist, because that's what the course is designed for. And so yeah, I do think that you need to do think about the basic skills in terms of the things that they're going to need to get them started. And again, maybe discussion with the employers that you're going to be working with around what they think is the minimum requirement before they get going. That might be useful for you to know, from their point of view, what's the basics they're going to need that's going to make the placement meaningful for them, because of course, they do have to complete the employer-based assessment, and they do have to be, complete their 45 days of placement, and we want to make that meaningful for them and good work experience, so that they can use that as evidence when hopefully they move into their career in accountancy. So yeah, I do think that that's a relevant point. Yeah, Paul, starting semester placements in semester 3 first year, or maybe slightly after. I think that that's probably an appropriate format, but of course that's up to you. You might have a day release and feel that it's more appropriate. But again, as we said, we want to make sure that they go out there and be able to make a good job of that placement as well as everything else. There is some account stuff in. You're quite right, in the core. If you were with us last week for the core session, we did point out that there are two units there, but they're not as specialist, anywhere near as specialist as the accountancy stuff is, as the comment does raise in the chat. So it's important to use that as a foundation. Do please try, if you can, to try and find links between the core and the occupational specialism, to find those links, to find those platforms to jump forward from, particularly if you're, covering some of the accounts unit early on in the first year, one of them is an earlier number in the spec. Then, thinking about how you're going to review that, so that when they come to their accountancy specialism, they're going to be able to then start to think about how they can pull back knowledge and understanding and skills, remember, from the first year into the second year element of the occupational specialism. So, going through, thinking of both, and what we tend to do, particularly on large qualifications, I think, is we tend to say, well, this is the little bit I'm teaching, this is my section, but it is important, to work within program teams to try and find the links between the units and the aspects of the core component and the occupational specialism that do link together. And of course, how they will, as we said already, support their sort of introduction into their placement, but also how that placement can support them in their occupational specialism studies as well. Okay, glad to see you reading up on some of the stuff at the moment, Paul. I'm sure there's going to be lots of us around the country sort of genning up and getting to grips with quite a lot of the new content that is in the T levels over the next coming months or year. Okay. Okay, and in the question around recruiting bright kids, I mean, your recruitment and selection processes are there, but of course you are going to need to be able to, one, see that they're ready for level 3 study, but two, be able to cope with an accountancy qualification and course. Okay, so thank you for your comments and feedback there. The only real things I've really got to add to that, so we covered most of it through that sort of group chat discussion and sort of my explanation of some of the points there, is please do remember when they come to their assistant accountant's assessment, they are going to be put each time in a scenario. Okay, and that scenario-based assessment, the things that they have to do are going to be exactly the same in every assessment. but in each window, the scenario, the focus, the industry environment they're going to work in is going to be slightly different. And of course, we will not know that until they start their assessment time period, for which that point we can't have any interaction. So it is really important in planning your program and planning, your delivery, to try and give them as experience of a wide range of different scenarios and different industry appropriate settings, so that when they come to their assessment at the end of the program for their occupational specialism, they're well prepared to cope with any scenario that they're given, and not just the one that they're working in within placement. So again, in terms of planning the program, thinking about that, thinking about the different scenarios, but also thinking about how the students can have the opportunity to come back and discuss with other students and on the program their experience of how certain things are working in their industry setting, as well as other people that may have actually a slightly different experience of it. So that's really the only thing that I would like to mention really about planning the program, is do think about that carefully in terms of preparing them for that end assessment. Learning isn't always about just assessment, but of course, they do need to be successful at the end of the program, and we want to well prepare them for that. And of course, do bear in mind that thinking of the different settings and scenarios will also help prepare them for when they go into industry, because of course if they do carry on hopefully into the accountancy industry, they may not end up working in an environment that's exactly the same as they've worked on in work placement. Okay, so thank you for your comments and your pointers there. That was really helpful. Hopefully, if you do have questions, feel free, please do put them into the Q&A window, and please keep contributing, because it's really useful to have your points of view. I think it does make you feel better when you're in an event such as this, that you can see somebody else saying exactly the same things and having exactly the same concerns as you do. Okay, so just moving on then, just a little bit about resourcing the programme in terms of the core component, but particularly, of course, the assistant accountant occupational specialism. There aren't any specialist equipment requirements for this programme. You will benefit, and your learners will benefit from a good IT suite with access to office software. But of course, in our case as well, appropriate industry accountancy software as well that they may be using on work placements. So again, when you're thinking about work placements, working with young people, maybe also talk to the employers about the software that they're using, so that the things that you're using will allow your students to experience it in the classroom as well as outside in their work placement. Teachers, of course, should have qualifications and or experience in the business sector, but in particular for the occupational specialism, I think we're seeing, and hopefully you'll see by the end of the session today, we do need some really quite specialist accountancy sector knowledge and experience to help this pathway to be delivered. Now, of course, it is level 3 study, so there is some quite intense stuff for a level 3 learner, but hopefully, as Paul said, once we swat on upon it, we will be prepared to be able to deliver it. But also do bear in mind that you do have that industry support from the employers, from work placements. I'm not suggesting we add to their workload, because their life will be busy enough asking them to deliver aspects of the programme. But some of the specialist knowledge and specialist experience that they will have obviously will cascade through the work placement. And we've already mentioned about sharing the teaching across the curriculum team, thinking about who has what experience. So if you've looked at the core components, and indeed you were with us last week, you'll know that some of that's the core component is very similar to other sort of business industry based knowledge they need, and some is very specific, whereas when we get to the accountancy occupational specialist section of the specification, the knowledge and the skills that we need to deliver are very, very specific. Finally, in terms of resourcing, in terms of staffing resources, we also need to think about teachers who have experience, or tutors who have experience delivering external assessments, thinking about the core component examinations, but also the experience of vocational task-based assessments, which indeed the Occupational Specialism assessment is very much like, and we'll see that as we move through this afternoon. So just bearing those things in mind. Okay, so hopefully we've kind of got how it's kind of fitting together. We've got an idea of, you know, what's involved and what we're kind of needing to think about in preparing and planning our programme. But let's get to know the Occupational Specialism specification in a little bit more detail now. And of course, I can't go through every line, every section of it, but I'm hoping to give you a little bit of an opportunity to delve into the different areas the learners need to experience. Okay, so the Occupational Specialism has 5 performance outcomes, and learners need to demonstrate competency in each of these performance outcome areas. Now, each of the performance outcome areas, you can see the 5 of them listed there, are then broken down into a number of skill statements. And these are the skills that your students are expected to be able to do or demonstrate by the end of their programme, and indeed in their Occupational Specialism assessment, and of course, whilst on work placement. Now, at the same time, there's also a number of underpinning knowledge statements, and these are the things that students need to know and understand to be able to demonstrate the skills. So we've got a little bit of a difference to some of the different qualifications you may have been experienced with, in the fact that we now have, through these performance outcomes, hand in hand as you move through the specification and look at each one in detail, there is information provided about knowledge, and then there is information provided about skills. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail, and we're going to use performance outcome 1, produce and analyse a trial balance, as an example. We're not going to look at all of it because we don't have time, but just as an example here. Now, at the very top, you can see in the green box that included there are the skills from the general competency framework that your students will need to have the opportunity to demonstrate through the knowledge and skills covered in the performance outcome. Okay, you can see D3 and M2 in brackets. These refer to digital mathematical skills from the framework. So if you are a BTEC tutor, and there's a couple of them mentioned BTEC already, if you are, you need to now get your head out of D3 and M2 referring to distinction and merit criteria, and change your mind into the fact that these are talking about digital and mathematical skills. If there was an E, that would refer to English skills. Now, next in the grey box, we've got the first specialism skill covered by the performance outcome. And you'll see in that first statement, S1.1, produce an initial and revised trial balance, applying the principles and concepts of double entry bookkeeping for recording and processing financial data to feed into the preparation of primary financial statement for review. So here we can see the S refers to skills, as opposed to the K, which refers to knowledge. And of course, it's 1 because it's outcome 1. And 0.1 because that's the first specialist skill within the performance outcome. And then under this, you can see 2 subskills, S1.1.1 and S1.1.2. And the last digit there is to note that there is all those subskills there. And then there follows the underpinning knowledge that the learners will need, K1.1, key accounting elements and double entry principles. And underneath that again, you have your sub-knowledge statements that gives you more detail of what they've got to understand. Those key knowledge and skill statements will vary in number, but you can see that in this example we have 10. So let's look at another example then. Just to kind of get us familiar with this first performance outcome, produce and analyse the trial balance, and you can see the example again comes from there. So we're now looking at S1.3, so that's the third specialist skills in the performance outcome, post corrections using double entry and journals. So the layout's the same. You can see at the top the green box, including the skills from the general competency framework that your students need to be able to demonstrate. And then again, the reference to the different skills. We've got English skills and math skills there because we've got E and M. And then we've got the specialist skills. In this case, we've got S1.3, post-correction using double entry and journals. And then again, that's broken down into sub-skills. So then you can see from the sub-skills exactly the things that your learners will need to demonstrate in their occupational specialism to be able to show competency. Okay, so final example then. Okay, we've on the last slide, we've got focused on skills. We've got a little bit more knowledge here. So you'll notice we're still looking at performance outcome 1. And just like the previous example, we're still reviewing the specialist skills S1.3, post-correction using double entry and journals. But now we're looking at a third sub-skill, and remember that there are 9 in total. So the S1.3.3, make adjustments to initial balances once journal has been prepared. Now, in this example, you can see the specialist skill S1.3 and then the sub-skill S1.3.3. It's followed by an extract of underpinning knowledge, so it tells you exactly there the things that they need to understand, be able to know about, and be able to recount and use when undertaking their occupational specialism and on placement. So, for example, K1.3, control procedures and the corrections of errors, including the postings of corrections using double entry journals and the use of control accounts. And then this is followed by a subset of knowledge, so 1.3.4, giving you the further information in depth and breadth. So that now allows you to start to think about, okay, what do I have to teach? What do they have to know? But also through the skills section, what skills they also have to demonstrate. And finally, again, we've demonstrated or identified the English, Maths and Digital skills from the general competency framework in the right-hand side column. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding how the specification works, although we've looked at it quite quickly. As I said, it outlines the overarching knowledge content, but then goes into a lot more detail and depth to understand the knowledge that needs to be understood, and of course, the content that you'll need to deliver. But also alongside that, explains the skills that learners need to demonstrate in their occupational specialism. Okay, so bearing that in mind then, we're going to move on and just spend a couple of activities looking at the other performance outcomes in terms of teaching and learning ideas. And this will give you an opportunity to familiarise yourselves with these performance outcomes, beg your pardon, and also think about teaching and learning ideas that you might be able to share to deliver the content. But also it might give you the opportunity to be able to think about any areas of those performance outcomes that are going to be challenging, either in terms of knowledge or in terms of skills. So what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to pause my mic again. I will be here in the background reading, obviously, your comments in the group chat and answering any questions you've got. What I'd like you to do is, with the specification, we've provided you a copy to be able to download if you don't have it already. Familiarise yourselves with outcome 2, prepare primary financial statements. Outcome 3, analyse business performance and present results. Consider the knowledge and skills required. Think about teaching and learning ideas that can help you deliver that occupational specialism content, but also think about the areas where your learners might find challenging. And if you can think of ways to overcome that, then please think of ways to overcome that. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you, give you an opportunity. Please, again, do share your ideas, your comments in the chat. It is useful to see communicating. And as I said, it does make you feel better, I think, when you start to see people saying the similar types of things that you would be saying. So over to you for a little while. I'll be back with you in a while. If you have put questions into the Q&A box, you can see there are some there. I'll answer those whilst you're having a look at this activity. Okay, lots of questions come up. I've started answering them in the chat, but there's just so many there. I just thought it'd be easy just to sort of come back onto Mike, because a lot of the queries, I think, are around, correct me please if I'm wrong, around what things should we be doing and teaching learning that will match the end assessment. And I completely understand your point of view, and I completely agree. You're absolutely right. We need to fully understand what that assessment's going to be, so that teaching and learning will help them achieve well and perform well in that assessment. Please bear in mind, though, that I did say it earlier, but the purpose of learning is not just to pass an assessment. So what we need to do, I think, is be really conscious of the fact that, you know, if there are different softwares available that they may be required to use, maybe predominantly use one that they will be using in the assessment, but that bear in mind that that might be different from the workplace. So just do bear in mind that, you know, even in this, we do want to know what there is in the assessment. I understand completely why, and I'm going to go back and ask those questions for you, and I'll ask Pearson's to send those out to you after the event. You know, we need to know what those are, but also do be aware that, you know, don't just think about the assessment, think about the work placement and also other ways that things could be done, because of course if they're going to want to go off and do something afterwards in accountancy, they will find it difficult to be able to do that unless we prepare them for it. But I think what you've got to the crux of, and I'm sure you can see why I put performance outcomes 2 and 3 together in this activity, is much of performance outcome 2 and 3, not all of it, but much of it is about the actual completion and production of documents. Okay, and then analysing those, you know, reconciling those, adapting those, you know, discussing those based on that. But the foundation, of course, is this financial statements, the business performance, the results, and presenting those results. And I will be going through later on a little bit about the external assessment. Do bear in mind, though, there isn't a date in yet, but I know it is being planned. Pearson are planning to run Getting Ready to Assess events as well, which will focus on the assessments in more detail so that you'll be more prepared. But I am going to cover that and go through what each task and which bit involves later on, so that you've got a bit more information. Okay, so there was also a chat a question in Q&A shared with you, which is, does it have to be computerized? Can it be manual? Well, again, I go back to my point in the fact, well, I would say that most organisations will use computerized packages now. But also, you know, a combination of both if you feel that's appropriate. But unless it specifies one or the other, then, you know, okay, but we are preparing them for an assessment which is in the electronic booklet. Now, there was another question or comment in the chat, okay, which I was just trying to find again because I haven't answered it. Okay, so Barbara, I do not know your answer to your question about the minimum specification for computer hardware to interact with the digital answer booklet. I do not think it's anything more than your school or college will have. But again, I will take that back and just ask that question. So I'll ask about specifically, there is specific software that you're expected to use and they will be expected to use in their assessment. And I'll also ask about the hardware requirements as well, and ask Pearson to bring that answer out to you, because I'll be honest with you, I have no idea about the computer hardware specifications. If you want to know about computers and all of that stuff, I'm not your woman, but I will find out for you. Okay, so that has, I think, paused us, given us pause to thought. It is the same repetition of the same task, so maybe not spend quite so much time on it. But what I would like to do is just give you a few minutes time just to try and have a look at the remaining 2 performance outcomes, because we discussed performance outcome 1, or I discussed performance outcome 1 earlier. But performance outcome 4 is provide support to tax and audit functions. Performance outcome 5, compare computations for payroll. Just again, have a look. The activity is the same. Are there areas that you're concerned about? Do you have queries and questions? Or have you taken the one about the payroll back in terms of software? And also in terms of, any ideas. So I'll give you a few minutes to review because I can tell there is some anxiety around the assessment. So I do want to spend some time looking at that. But over to you again for a few minutes. Please, again, do put your comments, questions, etc. into the chat. Okay, again, thank you for your contributions. Hopefully you've had the chance to review some of Performance Outcome 4 and Performance Outcome 5. And thank you for your comments in the chat. I do agree, I think some of the aspects of Performance Outcome 4 and Performance Outcome 5 are things that, you know, as us as practitioners, you know, we might not have as much, you know, up-to-date or on-the-ground knowledge and skills regarding. So it is an area that we might need to upskill ourselves in a little bit first. But, you know, Deborah, your reference to the HMRC webinars on payroll, I think probably everybody in the event, including me, has made a note of that. So that's fine. That's brilliant. Thank you. I think that's really useful to know. And, you know, I think one of the aspects I was going to say about Performance Outcome 4 and Performance Outcome 5 is some of it could end up being a little bit dry. You know, it's very much about, you know, tax. It's very much about, you know, regulations and systems and, you know, all of those different type of things, auditing. So we do need to find ways to kind of bring it to life and get them to see how it works in practice. So I think that, you know, the HMRC webinars might be one way to do that. And Paul, your example or your point about using the payroll team in college was something I was going to raise, in the fact that, you know, you will have people within your organisation that will have some training and some experience in these areas. You know, there's a kind of in terms of the two different, you know, kind of areas, in fact, that you could, you know, pick up on either your finance team or your HR team for different elements of this, and, you know, ask them to come in and maybe do some talks and things with your students, or even for you to go in and swat up with them, you know, to see how these things work, because I think there are some very specific elements of them that they'll need to know, understand, and then they do, of course, need to make calculations. You know, they have to calculate net pay, they have to calculate VAT, and for some of us, you know, tax might be something that, you know, we're not quite as excited about. Although, sorry, Deborah, no offence meant, hopefully none taken. You think it's fab. So, you know, maybe, you know, your experience in that area could be shared. And I was going to say actually earlier on, and I forgot about it, but it's just reminded me now. You know, if you want to share your email addresses with each other and share, so that you've got somebody to, you know, to sort of battle against, you know, somebody in this group might have some real experience, Deborah, in tax, for example, and other people might have other expertise. So if you feel you want to share it with the group, then do so. If you don't, then, you know, that's entirely up to you. But it is an opportunity to try and, you know, think about these things. But I think what I'd say generally about the content here is take aside the skills. Before we even get into the skills, there's a lot to learn. And that's not just for the students, I don't think. I think we need to take a step back and think about, you know, our own knowledge and understanding of some of these areas, because some of it is quite specific. Some of it, you know, we will have come across before and have, you know, our own understanding of it. The other difficulty with it is, of course, is unless the young person you're working with has a part-time job, they may have a little bit of experience of the other side of it, of being an employee. They may have done something like, you know, SEFs or something. You know, financial studies qualification, but most learners at Key Stage 4, who may be coming to you to do this qualification probably will not have studied a lot of what is in the specialist, occupational specialist content. Whereas, you know, if you look at the core element, if you do have people who have done business or a related subject before, they will have some background information. Please do also consider, as we've said already, to go back to the core, because, okay, there are only two elements of it and they are kind of quite shallow in comparison in terms of the knowledge and in terms of the breadth. You know, then thinking about that as a platform for them, and indeed for you to see the links in to some of these areas might be really useful. And again, as I've said, just to remember that the T-level qualification is no longer about colleges and schools on their own. It is about a partnership between academic providers, so colleges and schools, and also employers. So then you can maybe bring some of their experience in. The difficulty is, of course, is that, thinking about your learners and thinking about your placements, will they have practical access to all of the performance outcomes in their work placements? And that depends, I think, indeed on what their work placements might be. But if they go and work in a certain department within an organisation, or indeed an accountancy in a certain area, they may not have access to all the different performance outcomes as well. So that is also worth considering. And of course, some of them we can pick up and they can do it in the classroom and scenario based. And we know ourselves that you're trained in a certain area, but you don't use all of those things on a day-to-day basis. But do bear that in mind when you're thinking about teaching and learning and your preparation. And finally, I'm sure a lot of this in the group chat, but yeah, Paul, I think your point about AAT books on tax and auditing might be useful. I do think that's a really good case. Go to accountancy qualifications. You may even have, accountancy practitioners, deliver A-level that or thinking across others. And yeah, there's some suggestions in terms of thank you Deborah, in terms of level 2 AAT books pitched at a similar level and crossover. So there's some resources that you can maybe look at, maybe purchasing initially as a teaching sort of aid for your preparation to lessons. But like I said, you might have an A-level accountant teacher that you know or works in the organisation that you can tap into. Okay, so a lot of food for thought, I think. I think that's where we're at, and I think that's where we're all at with any new qualification. But, it just is useful to spend some time drilling into it and looking what actually is involved and thinking about our own auditing, I suppose, our own knowledge and skills in terms of how can we fill those gaps if we are going to be delivering this to the young people in school or college. Okay, so what I am going to move on now to look at just in a little bit more detail for the last little bit of time is to look at external assessment. And just give you a little bit of an overview. But as I said, this isn't a design to, prepare you in any way, shape or form for the external assessment. It's more in a way of trying to get you to understand what the requirements are so that you can think about introducing within your teaching and learning and assessment activities throughout the programme of your occupational specialism delivery, the different elements that you might need to consider. As I said, the getting ready to assess events will cover these in a bit more detail in terms of how will they be assessed, what skills are we looking for, etc. Okay, so let me give you an overview of the assistant accountant assessment then. So this is a single synoptic assessment for the occupational specialism, which is an extended design, development and implementation project that is set and marked by Pearson. Okay, so Pearson will set it, it's over an extended period of time, and then it will go away to Pearson for it to be marked. Now, the synoptic element of the project is important to ensure students can demonstrate threshold competence and are able to evidence all the skills required by the performance outcome. And you'll see in a few minutes' time when I go through the different tasks, each of the different tasks are awarded a number of different points. And of course, as you would have any learner in any assessment, and actually how we have been discussing, all learners have their different skills and qualities, their specialisms, the things they're good at and they're not. So it might be a case that, you get a learner that performs less well in one area and better in another. And I think we'd all agree that that is common within whatever industry specialism we have. Okay, so the students will undertake the project under supervised assessment conditions, and the assessments will take place over multiple sessions, which is the combined duration is 17 hours and 25 minutes. But each different task has a different time period, and it can be spread out and timetabled in different ways, and we'll talk about that in a few moments' time. The project consists of several activities grouped into 8 substantial tasks, which are marked, I've totaled out 258 marks, so there's a lot of marks available, and they'll be awarded pass, merit and distinction grades. Now, each of the tasks will be completed either on a date and time set by person, so a specific day and a morning or an afternoon session, or during a window that you will be set by person. You'll be told, okay, during this window of time, this task needs to be completed. And again, I'll show you a little bit of an example in a little while, just to hopefully try and make that a bit clearer. And during which you will supervise your schedule, you supervise assessment sessions, making sure that, of course, they're appropriately spread out, that there's time for learners who have additional access arrangements and extra time to complete the assessments as well. Maybe somebody who's missing from one element, that gives them time to catch up. And also, I suppose, spreading them out a bit, giving them a break in between each one of them. And we're going to look at each of these different sessions and the different sections in the next few slides. The project will present the students with tasks that emulate the activities undertaken in workplace situations. So there'll be an overarching narrative linking the tasks together, and the overarching scenario will be designed around a scenario in which the student is working within an audit or accounting firm as an assistant accountant and has additional duties as a payroll administrator. So they're going to cover the whole elements of performance outcome 1 right through to performance outcome 5, which, in the workplace, it's, some employees will do that in the industry, some will specialize in some, but what we want them to do is generate that they've got competency in all the areas. And during the scenario and the activity set, they'll provide accounting, tax, audit and payroll services to the firm's clients. The project scenario will focus on at least 2 types of organisation, for example, sole trader, partnership and limited company, and their related accounts, that will change over a period of time as response to the progressive nature of the scenario your students move through the tasks. So what we mean there is there's 2 different types of organisation, and it might get to the point where, it changes as they come to a certain point later on, or indeed it might be that they're working with different clients. This is a substantive project, and the tasks are mapped against the different performance outcomes. So your students will be assessed on their applications of the skills listed in the performance outcome, but they will not be assessed against the knowledge outcomes. Instead, they'll be asked to draw on their knowledge to demonstrate and apply their tasks. So none of the tasks are tell me about, describe any of the knowledge that they've developed. They are expected to demonstrate through their skills that they can apply that knowledge in the different scenarios and activity tasks given. The project's outcome will consist of a portfolio of evidence submitted either electronically or hard copy. So you've got a choice there. You can either submit it electronically to the exam board or print off a hard copy and send that away on paper. And you'll need to refer to the individual task guidance included within the assessments for further information on how to facilitate each task and how to collect and submit the evidence. And what we're going to now look at is just a little bit of an overview of each of the tasks. Okay, so let's have a look at the first 4 to start off with then. So task 1 will require your learners to prepare a trial balance and other reports for a given organisation using accountant package software and apply controlled procedures to complete a reconciliation. Now task 1 is set into 2 tasks, task 1A and task 1B. Task 1A is the preparation of a trial balance and other reports. A resource document will be provided giving the necessary information to the students and everything that they'll require, and their work should be completed using accounting package software. And as I said already, I'm going to go back and double check what software should they be using. Is it a specific one, or do we have some sort of choice? In task 1B, it's the reconciliation. A resource document and a digital answer booklet are provided for this task, and your students should complete their work using the spreadsheet and Word software. Now, the task overall, all of task 1A and task B together, is 2.5 hours long and is worth 35 marks. And that task is timetabled by Pearson. So Pearson will set that task. Everybody will complete it across the country at the same time. Now, task 2. Your students will prepare financial documents related to the given organisation, and it's split into 3. In task 1A, your students will prepare journal entries. Task 2B, they'll prepare a statement of profit or loss and appropriation accounts. And in task 2C, they'll prepare a statement of financial position. And again, they'll be provided with a resource document, giving the students all the information they're required to undertake the task, and they'll also receive a digital answer booklet. Task 2 is worth 22 marks and has a duration of 1 hour and 35 minutes, which are timetabled by Pearson. In task 3, your students will prepare task computations for a given organisation. The activities in task 3 will include completing a VAT return and responding short open response questions consisting of knowledge-based questions, basis calculation and basic computations. This is to assess the skills and the content in the areas of PO4 within tax. A resource document and a digital answer booklet will be provided, and your students should complete their work using a spreadsheet and word processing software. And this is worth 16 marks and is 1.5 hours in duration. In task 4, your learners will prepare financial documents related to a given organisation, and these financial documents are a statement of profit or loss, a statement of changes in equity, a statement of financial position, and a statement of financial flow, cash flows. Beg your pardon. Now, task 4 is split into 4. For each of the financial documents, and a resource document, and again the digital answer booklet will be provided, and they'll complete that using again a spreadsheet and word processing software. And that is 35 marks and 2 hours and 30 minutes in duration. Now, I am aware I'm giving you a lot of information here. You probably, might be scribbling things down. Do be aware that, of course, you do have the recording to go back to later on from this event. And this information also is covered in the Getting Those Specification recordings that I gave you the link to earlier. So if you're struggling to kind of keep up, take it all in, please do refer to that later on. Okay, so let's have a look at tasks 5, 6, 7, and 8 now. So task 5 and 6 are linked to performance outcome 5, prepare computations for payroll. In this task, your students will complete activities that include setting up new employees on a payroll system, responding to queries, short open response questions consisting of knowledge-based questions and calculations to assess the skills and contents in the areas performance outcome 5. A resource document and digital answer booklet will be provided, and your students should complete their work using word processing software. And this is worth 25 marks and is over a duration of 1 hour and 30 minutes. Now in task 6, this is where they'll produce their pay slip. Activities in this task include calculating gross through to net profit and using these calculations to complete a pay slip and respond to queries. A resource document and a digital answer booklet will be provided, and your students should complete their work using word processing software. This task is worth 24 marks and has a duration of 1 hour and 30 minutes, which can be scheduled by you in the window set by Pearson. Okay. Task 7, your students will consider auditing requirements and actions in response to the set scenario. The activities respond to assessing the audit skills and content in performance outcome 4. It's set into 3 tasks. Task A, task 7A1, task 7A2, B, and C. A resource digital document and a digital booklet will be provided, and your students should complete their work using the word processing software. This task is worth 19 marks and has a duration of 1 hour and 20 minutes. So finally then, task 8. This is the largest task in the project. It's 5 hours in duration and is worth 82 marks. In Task 8, your students should conduct a business performance analysis using information provided within the set scenario, and the task is set into 4. In Task 8A, your students will be asked to calculate ratios and produce a report. In 8B, they'll produce a cash flow forecast, report an updated cash flow forecast. 8C, they'll prepare budgetary information. And finally, in Task 8D, your students should calculate variances and produce a report. And again, resource documents and answer booklets will be provided, and some of the activities within the task your students will be required to do, they'll be required to use spreadsheets and word processing software. Okay, so you can see there from the assessment there's quite a lot to do. You can see that there's a range of different tasks, but I think what this starts to allow you to do is to start to consider which bit of each performance outcome is assessed in which task. This hopefully will allow you to consider during formative assessment how to provide formative assessment activities whilst you're going through the teaching and learning activities of the different performance outcomes in preparation for this end assessment, which is a large assessment, but do remember it is over a long period of time. Now, just to give you an idea of scheduling, some of the tasks are scheduled for you. Okay, you can provide a little bit of leeway. For example, task 6 is a window. This isn't set in stone. This will change. You may need to change around some of the times where they're sat in the windows to be able to consider when's best for your learners, take into account placements, take into account school holidays, bank holidays, staff training days. But as you can see, the tasks can be spread out over 4 weeks, giving them plenty of time to kind of break them down bit by bit, and also allow for learners who have been unwell and can't complete some of the assessments, for example, task 6, at a certain time where you've set it from everybody else, then they can undertake that at a later window. If it's a set task that is set and at the time is set by Pearson, such as task 1, for example, if the learners are unwell and are unable to complete the assessment, then they would apply for special consideration as they would if they missed any other examination. Okay, now I'm sure that around assessments a lot to take in. The aim purpose of that really is not to get you to think about how to obviously assess learner work, because we've got to get to the process of planning the programme and thinking about teaching and learning activities. But the idea here is just to get you to start to think and reflect about external assessment. And I'm just going to give you a few moments to reflect on that, to think about how could you use formative assessment to prepare the learners for their assistant accountant assessment? How could work placements help support them for that, and what challenges the assessment might create, and how might you overcome them? Again, only got 2 or 3 minutes because we are running towards the end of the event this afternoon, but please feel free, if you've got any comments you want to make, put them into the group chat. So over to you for a couple of minutes, just a reflection, just a few thoughts, and then we'll continue towards the end of the event this afternoon. Okay, I'm just conscious of time and pressure and getting you away on time this afternoon, because I'm sure you're coming towards the end of a busy term, and you know, want to try and have a little bit of a rest, maybe enjoy a bit of the sunshine in the late afternoon, if you're as lucky as with the weather as I am here. So, you know, thinking on the assessments that they've got to take place, it is quite a substantial assessment. So thinking about lots of practice assessments, regular practice at completing financial documents using accounting software, payroll software, etc. Please do also bear in mind, and if you read the performance outcome content in a lot of detail, some of these actual assessments actually involve not just the use of, you know, sort of financial calculations, but actually use of written communication. So it's also important to give learners the opportunity to practice those skills. And I'm sure that your experience as well as mine is, you know, students that tend to go towards finance and accountancy site programs tend to be those that don't really like writing. So it might be one of those areas that, again, you want to give a little bit more time to and think about. And also, as I said, think about how you're going to get learners, you know, to be prepared to undertake that amount of assessment over a kind of 4-week period. But also, you know, I think this drums in the fact that, you know, this is why we want the core component and, you know, the employer set project kind of done and dusted and done a good job early on, so they don't have to retake any of those, so that they can actually concentrate on this quite substantial assessment. As I said, that's a brief overview. A lot of information to take in, based on our planning, getting ready to assess events, which we'll go into a lot more detail and spend the whole event looking at the assessment, so for core and for also the occupational specialism. So just then, just to finish off, unless you have any further questions, please do put them into the Q&A if you do. Just in terms of support, I'm sure most of you are signed up on the page now. You know, we've got it sort of put in our favourites, the specification page for this qualification. Please do review it regularly. There are additions made on a regular basis with new qualifications. So there will be specimen assessment materials. There has been some additional sort of resources as well. I've seen some being put on for the core components, but not anything for the occupational specialisms yet, but some PowerPoints. As we get going into the assessments, there'll be examiners reports, you know, case studies, etc. So please do look out for that, for the support on the page. If you do have any further queries, then here is the slide you need, and you've got the slides, I know, as a PDF to refer to later. So this is how you can get in touch with us. Do please get in touch, you know, if you do have any further questions or queries. I'm sure you will as you start to get going through your planning and thinking about the course. As I said, there are getting ready to assess events planned, and also please do remember I gave you the link to the pre-recorded events, which will get you to know the specification in a bit more detail later, and you will have the recording of the event today. If you haven't signed up to it already, please do sign up to receive our monthly T-level e-bulletin. And all that leaves me to say, please, is thank you very much for your participation this afternoon. Got some really good ideas come through the chat. Good luck with you applying for this programme, and thank you very much, and good luck, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.